This brings us to another of the important mileposts of the infinite way, and one which will, like the first one here, this one also will enable you to check yourself, check up on yourself, to see whether you are falling by the wayside or whether you are continuing on the beam. This point requires an active practice on your part as I speak to you. You will have to follow me, not merely by hearing me, but by actually following me in an act of consciousness. I will state it this way. God's grace functions only in the immediate now. I want you now to follow me with your own consciousness. God's grace functions only in the immediate now. God's grace functions only in the immediate now. Now, while I am pondering this statement, now while I am sitting here listening, now while I am in a state of receptivity, God's grace is functioning in me and through me, in this universe and through this universe. God's grace is functioning in the consciousness of mankind everywhere on earth, but only now. Now, while I am in this state of receptivity, I am aware that now there is a life force permeating these trees and flowers. Right now, there is a life force permeating every tree and every plant out there. Right now, there is a life force permeating the ocean, the fish under the waves. Right now, in this immediate now, that you are consciously receptive, right now the grace of God is developing a sap in the roots, in what will appear to be tomorrow, or next week, or next month, will appear outwardly as blossoms and buds, and then finally as flowers or fruit. However, nothing is going to happen next week or next month, except for the grace of God that is functioning in this universe this second. So remember, the coconuts that appear next week are appearing because of a grace that is functioning in the coconut tree this moment. If there were no grace functioning in this moment, there would be no coconuts next week. If there were no grace functioning out there in the sea, there would not be the rising or the ebbing of the tides throughout these days, weeks, months, and years. As you are consciously aware, as you follow me, that a grace, a presence of God, a power of God is functioning in all nature, in all human consciousness, can you see that you could not make God function yesterday? Can you see how impossible it would be to go back and get God to function yesterday? Could you remove God from the functioning of this instant? Could you make God retrograde into yesterday and do something? Could God go back to yesterday and start functioning? Of course not. There is only now in the spiritual kingdom. There is only this moment. And there is only this continuing moment. It is because of this continuing moment that everything that happens in the future is going to happen because of this continuing moment. Could you possibly, follow this closely, could you possibly get God to function tomorrow, now, today? Could you this moment get God to do something tomorrow? Could you get God outside of this instantaneous moment? Of course you cannot. You cannot get God outside of this split second. You cannot move God backwards or forward. Whatever God is to do, God is doing now. Do you see then that every moment that you live in the past, you are living without God? You are living a godless life every moment that you waste living in the past. Because there is nothing God can do about it, because God is not there. God is here, and God is now. The place whereon I stand is holy ground now. If anything is to take place in my life, in what we call a future, it has to be as a continuing of the presence of the now God, the God of now. I cannot get God to operate tomorrow. The tomorrow operation of God is dependent on the now operation of God, because God is only functioning in this split second. And every continuing split second, God is functioning. That is why even God does not take a rosebud and an hour later have it into a full-blown rose, because God functions now. And then we, being in the functioning of now, unfold in accord with the nature of our being. But we could not do this without God. And we cannot get God to do it yesterday. And we cannot get God to do it tomorrow. The tomorrowness of God is solely due to the nowness of God. Now, in this split second, God is God. And God is an eternal God, because God is functioning eternally in the now, but not in the past and not in the future. So when you are living in the future, you are living as godless a life as if you were living in the past. Everything must be predicated on now. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. And that means that as ye sow now, so will you reap. Because in the act of sowing, you are in that God consciousness that determines the nature of the reaping. We, in this message, while honoring the good of the past, and while setting our plans for an harmonious future, can only do this in the realization that the future cannot be any more harmonious than the sowing that we do in the now. If we do not sow spiritually now, there will be no spiritual fruitage later, because the spiritual fruitage of tomorrow is the product of the spiritual sowing of now. That is why all karma can be erased in any moment, because the results of karma can only last while the seeds of karma are operating. And the moment a person moves out of the material consciousness where they sowed materially, there is no more material reaping, because they are not even there. They have died. In any moment that they have died to the past, they have been reborn in this nowness, in this second, and in their rebirth of the spirit, they carry with them nothing of the past, any more than the butterfly carries anything of the worm. The worm dies and the butterfly is born. The butterfly has no recollection of the worm. Any moment in which we meditate and have the conscious realization of the presence of God, in that moment we have died to our materialism. The birth of the Christ has taken place. It can take place 20 times a day in meditation, and at each time it will wipe out any part of the human past that continues to intrude. So you see how necessary it is to have periods in which you consciously live as though you were looking right down this lane now. Seeing nothing of the past, being not concerned what I shall eat or drink in the future, but now. I and my Father are consciously one. Now I and the Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. All that God is, I am in the now. Then when I have been silent, and this has been confirmed in me, now God is working with me. Now I can go ahead. And if I have to arrange for plans for next week or next year, I can do it. I can plan for 10 years ahead, if after that meditation I am given any plans to plan. That does not make it an act of the future. That makes it an act of the present extending forward. When we say that we do not make plans for the future, that is true in one sense and not true in another sense. Let me go back a few months and say that I had no plans and made no plans for 1962. Yes, but then came this awareness. Oh, there should be a class in California. There should be a class in Chicago. All this was in the present, that these ideas were presenting themselves to me. They were in a present moment that these ideas came. Then I could go ahead with plans of a human nature, reserving rooms, halls, sending out notices. I was not planning for the future. The whole idea came in the present, and the carrying out of it might be considered a continuation of this present. In that sense, then, we plan for the future. We order our tickets ahead or arrange for hotels or whatever is necessary. But that does not mean planning in the future in the human sense of where we make up our minds what we are going to do in the future and plan accordingly. The plans for the future are only the product of God working with us now and revealing to us that there should be a class in July. The minute that conviction comes, there should be a class in Honolulu in July. In that moment, then, we say, make all plans. But that was not human planning. That was taking the human footsteps, following the divine plan that was revealed to us. You have to see that worrying about the past, being concerned about the past, or having a guilt complex about the past is a waste of time, because there is no God in the past, and you might as well get out of it. If God is out of it, you get out of it too. Neither is there any use of undue concern about the future, except insofar as plans for the future are the natural products of ideas that are given to you in the present of what to do about the future. Certainly, if you have a child going to school, you must plan for it. But the idea is, do not have the child going to school until God has given you the signal that God is working with you.